So, hello and welcome to Letters of Stewardship. Apologies to viewers, I haven't posted a vlog for quite a while because I've been working quite intensively on my book, and not just on the book, but the book's making me think so much and read so much that I'm also publishing. I'm outputting quite significantly into journals at the moment as well. Added to that, the new term just started, the new semester, and we just had Chinese New Year here in beautiful Ningbo, and so that means I haven't had much time for my Substack, but here I am. So I just gave a talk yesterday at the Education University of Hong Kong at the Higher Education Leadership and Policy Research Interest Group, and I thought it went quite well, and I thought I'd share it with you. I was reading Sue's work on Inequality time, and it got me thinking and linking it to my own work, and so I put this together. It's essentially about academics and academic time, but I think it relates really well to educators also generally about how time is used and how time is becoming increasingly more inequitable. So I come from a time, I was born in the 70s, early 70s. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. A different time, it was a lot slower. And when I went to university, fortunately, I wasn't quite as, I didn't come from an affluent family. And so I was unable to then continue my academic pathway after university because I had to go to work. I couldn't do a master's degree or a PhD, just couldn't afford it, like many people in my situation. And so I over the course of my life, I in work got qualified and done my degrees. So I've prepared a vlog on that, which I'll get started now. It's called Who is Allowed to Have Time? Temporal Inequality and the Conditions of Research. So I want to begin with a question that sounds deceptively simple. Who is allowed to have time? Not who manages time well, but who is efficient. Not who is talented, but who is allowed to have time. Because in academic life, time is rarely neutral. It is rarely even distributed, and it is almost never simply a matter of personal discipline. Time is structured. Time is inherited. Time is stratified, and increasingly time is infrastructural. I want to talk personally here, not because autobiography is the point of what I want to talk about, but because it's never abstract, time that is. Time is lived. So I entered, as I mentioned before, academia late. Grew up in a single parent household. I was a full grant holder at university. I was a first generation undergraduate. I was accepted onto a prestigious master's program at UCL, but I couldn't afford to take it up afterwards. So I entered employment instead, like many other people. 7 years later, I self-funded a master's by distance, a master's in education with the Open University. I continued to self-fund further qualifications, teacher qualifications, and eventually completed my PhD while working full-time in an international school as a coordinator. I was married, I had 4 children. I had a lot going on, but I did not inherit any academic time. I inherited time debt. That phrase matters to me because entering academia late, essentially I entered it in my mid to late 40s, that's not just biographical colour, it has structural implications. It means competing with colleagues who entered during expansionary periods, when competition ratios were lower, when grant success rates were higher, evaluation cycles were slower, and when metrics were less intense. Many senior scholars built careers under those conditions. Rightly so. That was the structure of the time. So my generation, a little bit, but certainly those younger, build careers under contradictory time. Intensified metrics, hyper competition, permanent visibility, shrinking, and accelerated rates of evaluation. Time in academia is not evenly distributed. It is generationally structured. It is economically structured. It is geopolitically structured. And it is increasingly platform structured. So Cora Ling Su speaks of time inheritance, the idea that some inherit temporal positioning that affords developmental slack, while others begin already in deficit. I find that framing extraordinarily clarifying. Some researchers inherit banked time. They have slack. They can experiment. They can repeat a failed application. They can pivot. They can pause. Delay for them is developmental. For others, delay is dangerous. For some, an unsuccessful grant is experience. For others, it is threat. For some, a year without publication is incubation. For others, it is precarity. This is not about resilience. It's not about psychology. It's structural. It's structural positioning. Slack, opportunity. Without slack, risk multiplies. If you begin in debt, economic debt, institutional debt, temporal debt, you experience deadlines differently. You experience rejection differently. You experience visibility differently. Time in this sense is not simply, it is security. And security is unequally distributed. So pace compression in contemporary universities, well, temporal inequality is intensified by what I have come to describe now in my work over the last months as pace compression. Pace compression is not simply acceleration, it is a narrowing of the interval in which hesitation, reflection, and judgment can occur. We see this in continuous calls for proposals, real-time metrics, dashboards, in tight grant cycles, in email immediacy, in performance management, infrastructures that make academic labour permanently visible. Many academics now report spending more time writing grant proposals than scholarship. Can you believe it? With declining success rates, years of labour yield no visible output, essentially. Under such conditions, time becomes structurally violent when the interval necessary for thinking is removed. Violence here is not dramatic, it is procedural. It is the quiet of the interval in which intellectual risk can stabilise. If you invest 6 months in an unsuccessful bid and you are on a fixed term contract, that is not an abstract experience. If you carry caring responsibilities, that time cost is not metaphorical. The system increasingly trains scholars in futility tolerance. You must continue even when success rates decline. You must remain visible even when exhaustion accumulates. You must produce even when thinking requires slowness. Pace compression intensifies existing temporal inequalities. Those with banked time can partially resist compression. Those on borrowed time can. This part is called ontological capture, drawing on my recent article with Carmen Blythe. So this is not merely organisational, it's formative. In related work with Carmen, I've described a process I call ontological. This refers to the formatting of subjectivity within predictive and performance-driven infrastructures before reflexive agency stabilises. Younger scholars, especially, enter an academic environment already structured by platform visibility, strategic networking, citation analytics, performance dashboards, algorithmic evaluation. Visibility becomes more than borrowed, it becomes more than dwelling. Connection becomes instrumental rather than collegial. Reflection becomes secondary to submission. Obedience is no longer demanded, it is formatted. One does not experience coercion anymore. One experiences optimization. The rhythms of the system become internalized as personal ambition, and this interacts powerfully with temporal inheritance. If you possess bank time, you can resist some formatting. You can withdraw, you can delay response. If you do not, responsiveness becomes survival. Ontological capture amplifies temporal inequality. Part 5 is only visible in retrospect. When we look back at research trajectories, something interesting appears. Many of the most significant intellectual developments were unplanned. A failed grant redirected a research program. A slow collaboration matured over years. A period that felt stagnant became incubation. An unexpected deepened conceptual clarity. But retrospective meaning-making requires slack. Delay can only be reinterpreted as growth if it did not destroy one's position, one's job. Under metrics regimes that privilege immediacy, serendipity cannot be audited. Incubation does not show on dashboards. Slow maturation is invisible. If we compress time too tightly, we compress possibility. Research unfolds historically, relationally, unpredictably. Intellectual depth depends upon protected intervals. If the interval disappears, the horizon grows. Part 6, generational timing. So, there is also a generational dimension that we discuss openly. Earlier cohorts built careers under expansionary time, higher funding rates, slower evaluation cycles, lower competition ratios. Today's scholars build under contradictory time, hyper-competition, hyper-visibility, permanent precarity. This is not a moral claim, it is a structural observation. Generational timing shapes opportunity. If we do not acknowledge that, we misrecognize inequality as individual deficit. We interpret feeling behind as personal failure rather than structural compression. Part 7, leadership and the ethics of time. So, what follows from this? If time is stratified, inherited, compressed, and intellectually formatted, then educational leadership cannot treat time as neutral. One responsibility of leadership is to render equality visible, to legitimate non-linear trajectories, to recognize that some colleagues carry migrant, precarious, interrupted, or caregiving histories that do not appear on CV metrics, to understand that slow, that unproductive, that delay may be incubation, that slack is not indulgence, it is the condition of thought. Time stewardship becomes an ethical practice, protecting intervals for hesitation, ambiguity, relational encounter, and genuine collaboration is not inefficient. It is necessary for knowledge production. If we remove all slack, we remove possibility. If we collapse every interval, we collapse experimentation. And if we mistake compression for excellence, we produce compliance rather than thought. So in closing, when I return to the question, not who is most talented, not who is most efficient, not who works the hardest, but who is allowed to have time? Who inherits slack? Who begins already in debt? Who can afford delay and who cannot? Because in the end, time is not simply a resource. It is a condition of becoming. And if the university is to remain a site of intellectual formation, as well as the school, rather than pure optimization, we must ask not only how we use time, but how we distribute it. Thank you for listening.